Welcome to the Joyous Health Podcast, hosted by me, Joy McCarthy. I'm a holistic nutritionist, founder of Joyous Health, mama, and best-selling cookbook author. Join me for great conversations with people who are passionate about what they do and are making the world a better place. I hope this episode brings a dose of joy to your day. On today's episode, I chat with Dr. Shanna Swan. She is one of the world's leading environmental and reproductive epidemiologists. For over 20 years, Dr. Swan and her colleagues have been studying the dramatic decline in sperm count all around the world and the impact of environmental chemicals and pharmaceuticals have on reproductive tract development and neurodevelopment. Her July 2017 paper called Temporal Trends in Sperm Count ranked number 26 among all referenced scientific papers published in 2017 worldwide. She has published more than 200 scientific papers, a myriad of books. She has a book herself, which I will link up in the show notes. But we get really into the nitty-gritty about phthalates, and you'll learn that phthalates are on any type of soft plastic. But they are also on things you might not think about, like our food. In fact, that is the number one source of getting phthalates into our bodies. And so even though this kind of information may be a bit overwhelming, like, oh my gosh, I have so much exposure to phthalates, I just think the more we know, the better choices we can make. So if we know that, phthalates are in certain products that we might be eating, then, choosing different products. I think the thing is with food, the key is really to buy foods that are in as little packaging as possible. I'm not going to get into it because Dr. Swan does a much better job than me. You're going to love this chat. Here's my chat with Dr. Shanna Swan. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Swan. I'm thrilled to have you here. I feel like we've already spent a lot of time together because I've listened to you on other podcasts. And, after hearing you on other people's podcasts, I was like, this would be amazing to get you on the Joyous Health podcast because you are such a wealth of knowledge. You are doing the research yourself. You're seeing what's happening in the environment and what's happening to people. And first of all, I want to start off and say, I'm just so appreciative of you and the work that you are doing. You're doing amazing things. So thank you so much for being here. How are you today?
I'm fine. And I'm so happy to be talking to you. And I'm so glad you've read my work and listened to my podcast. So you know where I come from, and that's great. So that gives us a good background. Yeah.
Yes, amazing. So before we get started though, obviously we shared your bio and people know a little bit about you, but I want to hear it from you. Can you share a little bit about yourself and about your work?
Sure. So my background is very varied, very unusually varied, from starting out as a child actress a long time ago and moving into science and starting with mathematics and then gradually into the field known as epidemiology, which we'll talk about. I know that. And I spent a lot of years with the California Department of Health Services because I felt that I really wanted to help people with their health and environment problems. And that's a great place to do that because the departments of health of the United States and Canada, I'm sure too, are very involved in environmental factors and how they affect people's health. So I soon got into that through the health department, and then I went into academia with designing studies to address those questions.
So what got you inspired to do what you do and ask these questions? Have you always been an inquisitive person?
Oh, yeah. For me, solving a problem is the most fun there is.
Amazing.
I just love hard problems. I'm basically a skeptic, and I love, starting out, well, I don't think that's true. What could, explain that other than the obvious, and figuring it out. That's I've always loved that. So I'm still doing that.
So I love the fact that you said that you're a skeptic, but yet you love figuring it out. Because I think a lot of times people are very skeptical, but then they just stay skeptical and don't actually investigate. They just kind of make up their mind about things.
Right.
And I'm sure a lot of the things that you uncovered did not make you feel very happy. And they're not things that, people even want to. Have you come across that? Like people just don't even want to know this? Like I feel like sometimes people think out of sight or out of mind.
Yeah. I mean, people are very overloaded with stressful events in the environment and events in their lives, personal and out there. And my God, just think about everything we're dealing with right now, just coming off of COVID and now this world crises that we're in and climate change. And now I'm throwing in another one. No, I can't deal with it. I don't have the bandwidth. That's what I get from people.
Right. Yeah, I get it. But then I don't get it because I think knowledge is power, as the old saying goes. And if we don't have access to this information that you're going to talk about, then how can we make changes? And we can't just put our head in the sand. And there's so many little things that we can do in our own lives that can have a positive impact on our own health, on our kids, and on the environment. So why wouldn't we want to know all those things? So for those in our audience who are unfamiliar, can you give a brief description, explanation about what an environmental and reproductive epidemiologist does? And why is this work so important?
So, epidemiology, people are very familiar with infectious disease epidemiology now because of COVID, right? So infectious disease is not what I do. I do the other kind of epidemiology, which is called chronic disease epidemiology. So they're not peak infections that come and go, but chronic, throughout our lives, chronic exposures. And those will be things like heart disease and cancer, diabetes, and so on. And reproduction. So I got interested in reproduction a long time ago when I was looking at the birth control pill and looking at what were the side effects of the birth control pill for women who were taking it regularly. And I was part of a very big study. And that was my introduction to reproductive epidemiology. But it's a good example of what an epidemiologist does. So you have to have a big population. That one was an HMO called Kaiser in the United States. And so you have this big population of people that said, yes, you can study us. You need that permission. And then what you do is you have a question. So that question was, are there side effects, unwanted, health impacting side effects of taking the pill? And what are they? And for whom? And so on and so forth, right? So that study was a very big national study, one of the few very, very big national studies on the pill. And we looked at things like relation to blood pressure, in relation to cancer, in relation to lots and lots and lots of things by studying women who agreed to be studied and following them and seeing what was their exposure and what was their outcome. And that's always the formula. You get people, they agree to be in your study, and then you get their exposure that you're interested in. That was oral contraceptives, but it could be phthalates. We'll talk about that, a chemical environment, or it could be smoking. It could be caffeine consumption, whatever it is. There's an exposure, and you want to know what are the health effects of that. So to study that in humans, you got to have people, and then you have to follow them. Or you can do it in retrospect by going to medical records. So here's these records. All these people were diagnosed with this disease. Go back and see what were they exposed to. That's not usually as good because how do you know what they were exposed to? You could ask them, but maybe their recall isn't very good, or maybe it's affected by the fact that they got cancer. And they say, maybe it was that drug I took, or you know what I mean? So it's better to follow them. And that's what we do. So now for years now, what I've been doing is in my studies, enrolling pregnant women who agree to be in a study. And we try to enroll them early in pregnancy. So we see what's the effect of early pregnancy exposures. And then we ask them a lot of questions about their smoking and their drug use and their stress and their occupation and exercise and on and on and on. And then we also get samples. And by getting samples of their urine and their blood and sometimes their hair and so on and so on, you can find out what's in their body. So if I asked you, Joy, how much phthalate is in your body right now, how much DEHP or how much DBP, you probably don't know, right?
No, I have no idea. I'd like to know.
Would you like to know?
Yeah.
Okay, so you can know.
Okay.
And I'll just mention that there are companies to which you can send your urine samples, and they will tell you.
Oh, I'm totally going to do that.
Yeah. One is called Million Marker, and it's out of California. Okay. There are other ones. we don't do that. We do it ourselves. So in our studies, the pregnant women come in, they give us a urine sample, they give us the blood and so on. And then we send it off to be tested. And then we know what's in your body. That's the only way you can know, because the chemicals that come into our body without our knowledge is what we're concerned about. Smoking, we're concerned about, but we know if we're smoking, right? But for example, how much passive smoking we're exposed to, we don't know, right? So to do that, to answer that, you'd have to look in the urine and say, well, how much cotinine and how much nicotine? And that would tell you how much passive smoke exposure you had, or how much phthalates you have, or how much anything you want to know about, practically. And you can also measure that in hair, and you can also measure teeth are very good, because teeth are interesting. If you get child's teeth, you'll know what you were exposed to as a child. How amazing is that? Right?
So I've kept all the teeth that have fallen out of my 7-year-old's mouth. I can send those off too?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
Okay.
Not to me personally, but there are labs that look at that.
Yeah.
That's very new technology, but it's really interesting. It also tells you when the exposure was, because it's marked like rings on a tree trunk,
Okay. Yeah.
Rings. It's the same kind of thing. You can see where the chemical was laid down and date it. So that's really interesting. Anyway, I've talked about the epidemiology part. The reproductive part is the kind of outcome that I look at. So other people are other kind of like cancer epidemiologists, that's one, or those who look at neurodevelopment. I do that too, by the way. So a reproductive epidemiologist looks at reproductive outcomes. And of course, that can be in men or women. And I've done both. And those could include things like fertility in men and women, and sperm count, and ovulation frequency, and menstrual function, and endometriosis on the female side, and lots of, outcomes on the male side, undescended testicles, and birth defects of the genitals, and on and on and on. Anything involving the reproductive organs or reproductive function is going to be reproductive epidemiology. And as one colleague of mine said, he was a very wonderful man, he said, Shanna, the brain is the biggest sex organ in the body. And that's how I started looking at brain. And so, of course, there's a lot of outcomes, neurodevelopmental, we call them, having to do with these exposures as well. So I study both of those things.
So I'm curious if we can go back for a moment to your study you did on the birth control pill. What did you find?
Oh my gosh. Basically, we found there were problems with the higher dose oral contraceptives that were used at that time. And partly as a result of our findings, doses were lowered, and they found that they could drop the dose of estrogen and progesterone quite a bit and still have them effective contraceptives and have very little risk. So the health risks to women of oral contraceptives are very low now. What's not so clear is what is the risk to a fetus if there is a breakthrough pregnancy. In other words, if you forgot your pill and you actually did get pregnant, you didn't know it, and then you went back on your pill and you took it for another month until you knew you were pregnant. That fetus is being exposed to a lot of hormones during that time, and that has not been very well studied. So that's a risk that I'm concerned about. Also, another risk is that the urine contains a lot of these hormones, and that goes into the water system, into the water table, and so on. And there's a potential environmental exposure that we're also concerned about.
That's not getting filtered out, is it? Like most municipal water treatment plants are not eliminating all of the excess hormones, the pharmaceutical drugs, all that stuff.
Exactly. So we can talk afterwards on remedies and other ways to treat your water. But as far as the risk to the woman taking oral contraceptives, it's a really good medication, I would say, in getting the job done that people are taking it for. And with the current low doses, it's really safe, with the exceptions that I've talked about.
I was on it I'm curious if you looked at things. So I was on it for 10 years on a low dose. And for me, I don't know if you looked at these types of things, but like no libido really impacted my gut health, my gut microbiome. So my digestion, Did you look at those kinds of things, or was it more like long-term chronic disease? Like, does it put you at a greater risk for heart disease? Was it those kinds of things, or did you look at other things as well?
We looked at other things, but we did not look at libido. We did not look at gut health. And those are really interesting questions. And I have to beg off of answering those questions because I haven't studied oral contraceptives for a very long time. They're not environmental exposures unless they're in the water. Right? So, so I've also looked at pharmaceuticals. I've been studying Tylenol very recently, for example. So I don't just do environmental chemicals, but I have not looked at the effects of the, studies that look at oral contraceptive associated outcomes in recent years. So that's a great question, but I don't know.
So what about, can I ask what you're doing? What's your study on Tylenol? What are you looking at with regards to Tylenol?
Oh, gosh. So Tylenol is used by more than 50% of pregnant women all over the world. It's one of the most used drugs we have. And it's used because other analgesics, aspirin, ibuprofen, are not considered safe in the second half of pregnancy. So obstetricians tend to just say, Tylenol, fine, take it, that's fine, you're good to go. What we found is that there is a large literature now, which is not conclusive, but pretty suggestive of adverse effects on the offspring associated with use of Tylenol in pregnancy. And I and more than 100 colleagues published a consensus statement. And what we say is this: there's still a lot of work to be done on Tylenol. It's needed in some cases, like fever. It definitely is not good for the fetus. Okay. Severe pain is very difficult, and you need some control for that. However, it turns out that more than half of the use of this drug is not for those reasons. It's because it just makes you feel a little better. I don't know if you take it, but I've had that experience.
Very rarely. Yeah. Very rarely when I get like a headache, but I actually don't find it works very well.
So, I mean, some people say it helps them sleep. Some people say it helps them with depression. It helps them be less anxious. And it actually does go through the cannabinoid receptors. So there's a little link here. And
wow, I didn't know that.
So the fact that it's taken by so many pregnant women, and they take so much of it throughout pregnancy, is that it's just something that we have to look at. So in our consensus statement, we're saying, take only what you need. And if possible, check it out with your prescribing physician before you take it. Consider it as a drug. Most people do not consider it as a drug. They consider it like, I don't know, what they might take, vitamin. You maybe consider it like a vitamin or a nutrient and a little Tylenol, why not? But
I actually did not know that. I did not know all those other reasons that people take it. I'm actually really surprised. I had no idea.
Yeah. And because there have been a number of studies, lots of studies on it now, and often, and we've done some, and often we ask, why did you take it? And then we know the reason, right? And and that's called indication for use. And the reason you take it is important epidemiologically, because maybe the reason you took it is the reason you had this bad outcome. And so taking the drug and the problem you took it for are mixed up. We say confounded, right? Because these two things can't be separated unless you do a special analysis. The best thing to do is you enroll some women, you say keep a diary, and every time you take a medication, write it down and write down why you took it. And then you can separate the drug from the use. But it's very difficult, and most studies have not done that. So the limited evidence that we have suggests that there is some links to neurodevelopment and some links to some reproductive endpoints. And it actually chemically is similar to some other chemicals that affect reproduction. So, and neurodevelopment. So structurally, chemically, that's how it came to researchers' attention, by its chemical structure. And that's how researchers sometimes start looking at something and say, oh, this is structurally like that other chemical. And that's how this happened. And it's a work in progress, definitely. It's not, I don't want to alarm people. I don't want it taken off the market, or I don't anything like that. But it should probably be not that easy to buy. Like in a gas station, you can buy a big bottle.
Right.
In the supermarket,
Right.
you can buy a big bottle. And then if you don't think it's a med, if you think it's like a nutrient, why not take as much as you want? And that's what's happening right now. Yeah.
So you're kind of in the beginning stages
Yeah.
of this research right now?
Yeah.
And when you said, I don't know the exact word you used, you said you wrote a consensus. Is that what you said it was? You and a bunch of other scientists? What does that mean, that you released a statement to say this is something that we need to be aware of? To kind of say, hey, this is what we're researching and this is what our hypothesis is?
That's exactly right.
Okay. And what was the response from the medical community?
Mixed. And particularly OBGYNs don't like it because it's their go-to med for pregnant women. And so it's very difficult to interfere with that prescribing practice at all. And I would say it's just, it remains to be seen, what's going to happen with this, whether we can get people to use less of it. I mean, if you called up your physician and said, I'm in a lot of pain right now and I don't know what to do, she would say, take Tylenol, and that would be fine. I'm running a fever of 103. What should I do? Take Tylenol. Yes. But I just don't feel very well this evening. I need something to just make me feel better. And I'm not sleeping that great. Then I'm not so sure. Maybe you need to get a little exercise, or maybe, there's some, or talk out your problems, or, meditate.
Right. Yes, meditate, do some breath work.
Right.
Yeah. But that's not usually the things that were being recommended.
Right.
I just don't understand though, like why, when we are on the cusp of learning more and we have this, potential, you have this study that you're working on and you have this hypothesis, why, some people in the scientific and the medical community are so resistant. Like, why wouldn't they want to know? If you're saying, raising the red flag, hey, this might be an issue. Why is it that I just never understand? Why do these doctors not want to know more? Yes, we need to know more. I don't know. I just find that so hard to wrap my head around. Is it just because people get so stuck in what they believe?
Physicians, and I have several in my family, are so overworked, with so little time to do what they have to do in today's medicine. They have to know the answers to these things. They have to know what to send patients to. They have to have a response. They have, and if you say to them, maybe you shouldn't be using Tylenol, and we don't have an alternative, by the way, it puts them in a really tough spot. So I understand the resistance. And some are, physicians are saying, let's look at this. And I think that's great. But most physicians are not research minded. They don't have time. So I think women can do that themselves. They can think about, do I really need this? And for all medication. And the general recommendation is when you're pregnant, take as few medications as you can at the lowest dose you can for as short a time as you can to relieve your symptoms. And I mean, I think nobody would disagree with that recommendation. So if people use Tylenol that way, I think it would be definitely decreasing the use.
Yeah, totally. And also, I mean, just in my own research, because I get migraines or headaches every so often. And if I ever do have to take a Tylenol, I take it with NAC, N-acetylcysteine. Are you familiar with that?
No.
Yeah. So N-acetylcysteine, obviously when you eat protein broken down into amino acids, the liver takes the amino acids and makes it into NAC. And NAC is amazing for reducing any liver toxicity from Tylenol.
Great.
So there's a study that actually shows that when you take them together, that you actually reduce the toxicity of the Tylenol and acetylcysteine. Now, I don't know. And what I would be curious about, what a great study would be, is like, can pregnant women take that? I actually don't know if pregnant women can take NAC. It's NAC for short.
If they could, a study in which maybe a random half of the women in your study took it and half didn't, and then looked at outcomes, that would be a fabulous study, right? We can design a study together, right?
Yeah, exactly. Nak, so when you were talking about Tylenol may, we don't know, as you mentioned, because you're just launching this study, neurodevelopmental problems. Are you talking autism? Because I know there's been a lot in the news and people have been extremely alarmed by that. And yeah, it is alarming, but is that kind of specifically what you're looking at, or is neurodevelopmental effects?
ASD, the spectrum, ADHD, the spectrum, have been looked at quite a bit. I'm not studying that right now, but I have the consensus statement has a list of all the publications that are relevant to that in humans and in animals. By the way, animal studies are really important here, right? Because you can really modify the exposure. So those have been studied in animal and human. And we also there are other intellectual disabilities are part of those sometimes. And so, yes, there've been a lot of studies on that. They're mixed, but there's enough question. That's what we're saying. There's enough of a question to limit your use if you can. That's all we're saying. Don't freak out.
I appreciate that.
Need it, but try to limit your use.
Yes, everyone listening to this, do not freak out. Right. Exactly. It's just, I think it's just continuing to be curious and learning more. That's really what we need to do. And then also look into NAC and acetylcysteine. And now for a short break. I've always been obsessed with skincare products, but because of my sensitive skin, I have to be super careful about what I use. That's one reason I was inspired to create my own line of all natural products that are gentle but effective to use on all skin types called Hello Joyous. We crafted our line to include powerful botanicals from nature like certified organic rosehip, comfrey root, golden jojoba, calendula flowers, chamomile, and more. It was also so important to me that our products be made locally with natural organic ingredients that have functional benefits that include everything from anti-inflammatory action, super hydration, and antioxidant power to prevent premature wrinkling. Every single ingredient has a purpose, so you won't find a single filler in our products. And when it comes to creating a safe, all-natural skincare line, what we put in is just as important as what we leave out. The conventional beauty industry is the furthest thing from clean. In fact, according to the David Suzuki Foundation, up to 80% of conventional personal care products contain the toxic 10 ingredients. These include everything from parabens to coal tar-derived colors to formaldehyde-releasing agents and hormone-disrupting ingredients such as artificial fragrances that contain phthalates. Unlike conventional products, our Hello Joyous skincare line is free from all these harsh chemicals, making it completely safe and non-toxic for you and the planet. From cleansing to balancing to hydrating and exfoliating, we have something for all your skincare needs. Crafted from nature with organic ingredients, formulated to bring you and your skin joy. Check out our cleanser, toner, serums, and exfoliating mask. Visit hellojoyous.com and use code PODCAST to save 15%. That's hellojoyous.com, hellojoyous.com, and use the code PODCAST to save 15%. And now back to my guest. Okay, so let's switch gears a bit. You're an expert on the decline of sperm counts and the environmental toxins and pharmaceuticals, the effect they can have on reproductive health. So I was hoping today we could talk specifically about phthalates, such a funny word when you read it.
It is a funny word, yeah.
Phthalates, such a weird word, and their impact on the endocrine system. So let's start out with, what are phthalates?
So phthalates are chemicals that are added to plastic to make them soft and flexible. So you think a rubber ducky, a shower curtain, right? A tube, any soft tube like in the hospital will have phthalates. So that's a plasticizer. But also phthalates are put into products for other purposes. For example, they're put into cosmetics, and they're put into cosmetics for two reasons. They hold scent and color, which is something you want in your personal care products. And they increase absorption, which is another thing you want in your personal care products, right? If you put a hand cream on, lotion on your hand, it goes into your skin, right? Disappears. So it's absorbed. And phthalates help with that. So, and there are other uses. So these are chemicals that are very, very, very prevalent. That is, they're in most people. In fact, the CDC measures a random sample of people in the United States every couple of years. And they've shown over and over again that like in the 90 percentile, 98% of people, 96, depending on which one, have these measurably in their body. And so that urine sample that you might send off to be tested would show you how much of each of these phthalates are in your body right now, right at the time you give the sample. Something else you should know about phthalates is that they're non-persistent. So that's a nice property of chemicals to have because they don't.
What does that mean?
Doesn't stay in your body. It goes into the urine.
Right.
It's water soluble. That's what it means. It's water soluble, goes into the urine, and you excrete it. So the half-life is about 4 hours for most phthalates.
Okay, so that's a good thing.
That's a good thing. The bad thing is that they're continually entering. So they're continually entering your body, and they come in. Let's think about how they come in. So they come in through your food, and maybe we'll talk about that some more if you want, how they get in food. They come in through your water. They come in through you breathe them. So there's ingestion, that's food and water. Inhalation, that's breathing. Dermal absorption, I told you about putting them on your skin. Okay, so that's how things get in your body. Those are the three main ways things get into your body. And phthalates come in all those ways. And they come in all the time because most of them we're not aware of at all. We're not aware when they're in our products. They don't have to be labeled, on most things. And, they're just invisible. They're silent, invisible chemicals that I say invade our body without our permission all the time. It's kind of scary.
Yeah, it is scary.
Yeah.
It's not good. When it comes to food, is it because of the food packaging, like plastic packaging on food? Is that how they're getting in there?
It starts much earlier than the packaging, actually. It starts with the pesticide. So I told you to increase absorption. Right. So if you have a pesticide you're placed on your farm land, you would like that pesticide to be absorbed into the plant so it will protect the plant. So it's added to pesticides as an inert ingredient. Not all of them and not into all plants, but yes, that's a risk. Then there's a risk from how it is stored in the farm and how it is transported, the packaging that it's in, and then maybe it goes to a factory. So you have a load of tomatoes. You want to make tomato sauce. Okay? So process that. And a lot of the processing goes through plastic coated containers or plastic tubing or plastic equipment and the feature of these phthalates is that they don't stay in the plastic. They're not chemically bound to the plastic. They're very quick to leave the plastic, particularly if something warm is near them. So they jump into the warm tomatoes or
right.
If you're milking a cow, this experiment was done in Eastern Europe, a very nice, simple experiment. So this farmer milked a cow the old-fashioned way by hand, and he didn't find any phthalates in the milk, right? And then he milked the cow using a milking machine. You know what a milking machine looks like, right? It has all these tubes. Those tubes are plastic. They contain phthalates. So that milk contained phthalates. So then you buy that milk, and the milk you buy in the store, even organic milk, is not going to be hand milked. It's going to be milked by milk. Right? So it's going to have phthalates in it. Yeah. So, and then when you get it to your house, well, you're going to put it in containers. If maybe you open a package and you're going to put it in a container, you're going to put it in a plastic container. If it's a soft plastic container, it's going to have phthalates. And then maybe you'll cook it in the microwave, hopefully not in plastic, but some people do. And these little pouches, there was a machine my mother used to have, put the food into the pouch, seal it in, then you can freeze it, and you can put the pouch,
like vacuum seal,
right? Put it in the microwave. Bad idea. Very bad idea.
Yeah.
So I would say from the time the plant is growing in the farm to the time you get it on your plate, the phthalates can come all along the way.
Now, what about during pregnancy? Are phthalates when the mom is either ingesting them or they're getting into her body because of her perfume or her products? Is that crossing into the fetus?
Yes.
Do you know that?
We do know that.
It is.
We know that both through experiments of placental transfer, but also we know because we see effects in the fetus. And how would that happen?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you next. So what are, because you were saying like from the time it goes, like it's water soluble, so the body is excreting it through the urine. Does it also come out through the sweat as well, or mainly just urine?
I don't know. That's a good question. I would imagine
so if
it comes out in the sweat. Yeah, it's water, right? But it's also in the bloodstream. And right? And that's what goes to the fetus. So there's the maternal fetal transfer circulation, and it gets into the fetus. So it gets into the placenta, and then it crosses the placenta, and then it gets into the fetus. Now, we can't look into the fetal environment directly. It's very risky to the fetus. Like, for example, to take a sample of amniotic fluid, risky, right? So there's no direct eye into the amniotic sac, but we have some indirect ways of looking. Namely, we can look at some of my studies have done that development that depends on what's happening in utero, and then we see the effects in the newborn. And by the way, let me say, for animals, you can look directly. Yeah.
Oh, okay, right.
Okay, so let me back up and just tell you a nice story because we have time and we're talking very informally like this. So I was on a plane to Japan with a colleague, and John Brock is his name, and he was a chemist, and he worked for CDC. So we're going to a meeting. The meeting is about environmental chemicals in Japan, actually a kind of chemicals that disrupt our hormones, which we haven't talked about, endocrine disrupting chemicals, or EDCs. That's what the meeting was about. Phthalates are among those. So I'm in the plane with John, and we're talking. It was a long trip. And he says, Shanna, you should study phthalates. And I'm like, why? What are phthalates? I had no idea, right? And this was around 2000. So, maybe 25 years ago. It's a long time now since I've heard the story, And so he started telling me. So he said, first of all, at the CDC, we now know how to measure them in people's bodies with small samples, pretty cheaply, in a lot of people. So we can tell you that they're in everybody. So here's something that we're not born with unless it's entered through the environment. We're not, meant, whatever that means, to have these in our body, and they're foreign. They're foreign chemicals as opposed to chemicals that the body makes. And so these foreign chemicals are in everybody's body. So that's point number one. Then he told me the thing that got me really interested. He said they've been studying it at the National Toxicology Program and the EPA. And what they found is that the male offspring of mothers who were fed these phthalates develop something so special that it's been given a name, the phthalate syndrome. And before I tell you what that is, I just mentioned there's no other chemical that I know of that has a syndrome named after it, right? So that makes it kind of a thing, something that you really want to find out more about. So what is the phthalate syndrome? By the way, there is fetal alcohol syndrome, but that's not quite the same thing because that's not an inadvertent chemical exposure. So the phthalate syndrome is a cluster of outcomes in male offspring, boys, right? And it was measured first in animals. And when he talked to me about this, it had only been seen in animals. And what they saw in these rats, that when the mother was exposed to 3 phthalates, and I can tell you the names, but they'll sort of run off you, but they are DHP, DBP, right, and DINP. Those three phthalates, because there are others that have the same property now, these phthalates have the following effects on the male. First of all, on average, they have smaller genitals. Not something that a male wants particularly. They also are associated with birth defects of the male genitals, including undescended testicles, so testicles that stay in the abdomen but don't come down into the scrotum. And
Yikes.
And also, more yikes, is hypospadias, which is really disturbing because the urethra through which the urine comes out, right, is not at the end of the penis. It's on the side.
What?
Yeah. So
that is bizarre.
That's right. And is
this happening in humans too, or is this just on these rats?
Well, that's the first it was seen in, let's start with the rats. We're talking about the rats.
Yes. Okay.
So that's, that was why I asked after hearing.
Yeah.
And finally, I have to introduce another difficult term, which is anogenital distance. So what is anogenital
I've heard you talk
distance?
about
That's
this.
terrible.
Yeah. It's so weird.
Right?
I never knew this was a thing until I heard weird.
I know, right? And so actually you can think of it as the overall size of the genital region, which is called the perineum. Okay. It's how far is the anus from the genitals. So on the street, by the way, kids talk about this. They know it. It's called the taint and the gooch and the grundle. Those are 3 street
Something
names.
So funny about hearing you say that. Right. People get true. That when they're hearing this, and they're like, oh, that's what that is. Okay, I know.
So it turns out that males, that distance in males is 50 to 100% longer than in females.
Right. Okay.
And
like that's what it should be. Is that what you're saying?
If you just take 100 babies and measure it in males and females, or you measure it in rats, or you measure it in any mammal, with the exception of the hyena, by the way, you'll see it being much longer in males and females. And that makes sense because if you think about what's in that space, there's a lot more in males than in females because female organs are internal. Okay. Right. The ovaries are internal. The testes are external. The penis is much larger, and so on and so forth. I don't have to go into detail. But anyway, there's a lot more going on there in that real estate than in males. Right. And so it's longer. So it turns out that the sort of most dramatic thing that the phthalate exposure does is it makes that distance shortened in males that is more female-like. And so in general, if you had to characterize what phthalates do, they produce what we say is an under-masculinization of the genitals. And to understand that, and also to realize that it happens very early in pregnancy, you have to start with what does the genital tract look like at the beginning? Mm-hmm. As soon as you could see it, it's a ridge. It's just a ridge. It's the same in males and females. And it starts to develop. And then in early pregnancy, we don't know exactly when, but in the first part of the first trimester, we know exactly in rats, but we don't know exactly in females. The testicles in males, of course, start making testosterone. So the testosterone start developing, the testicles develop, they start making testosterone. And that testosterone sends a signal for the genetic male to develop in the male typical manner, right? So the things where we see in males start to develop that very, very early. That means if the testosterone is not there at the right time, because this is all time, it's like a ballet, all time. If the testosterone is not there, then it doesn't happen, or it doesn't happen as completely, or it doesn't happen at the right time. And the result is the phthalate syndrome. So the presence of the phthalate syndrome, and particularly the AGD, anogenital distance, tells you whether testosterone was present and enough testosterone was present and at the right time. Now, there's a female part to this too, and that is that if the female does have testosterone, but not nearly as much. And if there's too much testosterone, then her genital tract is slightly masculinized, and her AGD is longer than average for a female. And so we showed this, for example, in daughters born to women who have PCOS. You know what that is, PCOS?
Yeah.
Polycystic ovarian syndrome.
Yeah.
So that's a condition in which the mother has excess testosterone, right? And so her daughter is going to be slightly masculinized. So let's go back to the male now, because that's the primary, effects are on the male. There are also effects on the mother herself, on her testosterone, because her testosterone is going down too. But let's come back to that. So you're exposed to these phthalates, the mother, during pregnancy, and she proceeds with the normal pregnancy and doesn't notice any difference. And then when the baby is born, you can measure these things. So we did that.
Right.
So I told you we studied pregnant women, and then we got their children, and then we measured the size of the anogenital distance, the size of the penis, the size of the scrotum, whether the testes were in the test, had actually migrated down into the scrotum. And we found the answer to your question, which is it only in animals? And the answer was no. We found this phthalate syndrome in humans. It had never been done before. So that's what really kicked off a lot of concern about phthalates. Because if they can do that, what else are they doing? What else needs enough testosterone? It turns out that these phthalates have the ability to lower testosterone. They don't just do it in the genitals. They also do it in the brain. They do it all over the body, right? So that's sort of in a nutshell, that's the most, I think, dramatic effect of phthalates on the body. There are many others, for example, in females, they're related to adult females, related to endometriosis, they're related to fertility, they're related to time to pregnancy, and so on and so forth. Many, many other outcomes. But I just told you this very dramatic one, which is of particular concern to pregnant women and also to men who are going to conceive a pregnancy.
Right, because which is what your book is about, the decline in sperm count.
Right.
So you saw as well that phthalates are affecting sperm count. Was that another study that you did as well?
Actually, the link to sperm count in animals is pretty direct, but in humans is less direct. And that's because, for example, this newborn baby that's been affected by phthalates, that baby isn't going to have sperm for a long time. In fact, as researchers, we can't study them until they're of age, 21. Okay. So what we did was we, first of all, looked at animal studies and said, this AGD that an animal has at birth, what happens to it as that animal gets older? Okay. Well, it's longer.
That's the taint? Is that what you're talking about?
The taint.
Okay.
The taint. And
just clarifying.
As the boy gets older, his taint gets bigger, of course, just as your hands and feet get bigger and every part of your body gets bigger. So whenever you talk about a short AGD, you're going to talk about it short for a certain size, short for a certain sex and size. And there may be other characteristics you want to control for too. But anyway, so what they found in animals was that if a newborn pup, had a short taint, then when he was an adult, he still had a short taint. Maybe it was 20% shorter than expected, and it would still be not 20, maybe 22, maybe 18, who knows, but short, right? So that says, one of my colleagues who works with animals says, AGD is forever. Just as I have pretty small hands, I'm small, so, but, I've always had small hands, so they're not suddenly going to get huge, I mean, your body size, your proportions stay the same as you age. Okay, so given that, And given that we couldn't look at sperm in newborns, we looked at young men. And we enrolled young men in a university. It was University of Rochester. And we got them to come in. We paid them $75. And we got them to let us measure their taint. Okay? And give us a semen sample. And they did some other things too, but questionnaire and so on and so forth. And very happy to do this for $75, by the way.
And like, what? You're going to pay me for this? Obviously.
And so what we found was that the longer the taint, the higher the sperm count on average. Was a direct correlation. And then a colleague in California did the same study in his clinic population and found the same thing. And he also found, by the way, that men who had never fathered a child or had problems with fertility also had a shorter taint. So then we had a link between this
That's fascinating.
And reproductive function in adulthood, right? And so you have the mother exposed to these phthalates. The child is born with altered AGD. And when he grows up, on average, this is all on average, he will on average have a smaller sperm count and have more trouble conceiving a pregnancy. And that's really the big picture. And that took me, by the way, the study showing a short AGD following phthalate exposure, I repeated that. Now, each of those studies takes at least 5 years and costs close to $5 million.
Wow.
And then we had to do this study in young men in Rochester, which was another, I think that was 3 years and maybe $3 million. So to establish this link between a very common exposure to an endocrine disrupting chemical or chemicals, the phthalates in this case, and a health outcome is hugely costly. I just want to stress that.
Yeah, no kidding.
We have to look at animals. We have to look at animals.
Yeah.
And we have to, the government should be doing that for everything that's put out into our products, but it's not. End of that story.
So I'm curious with women as well, in how their taint was, like what are the effects of a longer taint in women in regards to their fertility? Did you look at that as well?
No, but that's a great question. You and I should do some researching.
No, I have a lot of questions.
That's a really, really good question. So what you're saying, I mean, one way you could look at it, since we know that women with PCOS have daughters with a longer taint, you could sort of skip that step and you could say, are daughters born to women with PCOS, do they have more fertility problems? And I would say probably yes, just based on the fact that women with PCOS have more fertility problems, right? And so it's likely that their daughters are too. So the shorter AGD or taint is longer is an intermediary in there, but it's not maybe the primary cause of because there's a lot of things going on in the mother and in the daughter that are, the mother passes them on to the daughter. And so this distance may not play the key role that it, I don't know. Yeah. But no, that's a great study. And I don't think it's been done.
And now for a short break. I'm a huge fan of natural beauty and using the cleanest products possible for healthy skin, which is why I wanted to tell you about a wellness tea that supports healthy skin from within. Pure Radiance Tea by Hello Joyous is loaded with skin-loving ingredients like rose petals, nettle, moringa, lavender, green, and white tea. It is seriously the prettiest tea. You can literally see the organic dried rose petals, and they are an antioxidant powerhouse. Rose helps to strengthen and protect skin cells, and traditionally they've been used for digestive wellness, which is the key to glowing skin from the inside out. And organic nettle, which is rich in minerals that truly nourish the whole body. It is known in traditional herbal medicine to help prevent inflammatory-based conditions of the skin. And Pure Radiance also contains organic white and green tea, which are incredibly rich in skin-loving antioxidants. Every cup will help strengthen and protect skin cells, while it nourishes the gut and supports healthy digestion for glowing skin from head to toe. Pure Radiance tea is a light and earthy herbal green tea blend that will have you glowing from the inside out. Check out Pure Radiance tea at hellojoys.com, and you can enjoy 15% off your next tea purchase by entering JHPTEA when you go to the checkout. So that's hellojoys.com, JHPTEA for 15% off. Let's get back to my conversation.
And what about, okay, so we know that clearly it's causing these birth defects. What about exposures as an adult? Like, how is that affecting adults?
That's another wonderful question. So that's, first of all, long-term effects of adult exposure have not been studied at all.
Do you have any theories on that based on doing a lot of studies, what you think?
Well, what we know is that the impact of these chemicals is greatest during periods of rapid cell division. So early in pregnancy, then again in puberty, then again at the time of menopause is probably another risky period. So periods in which the hormones change naturally would be periods to look at for times to influence what comes after development, right?
Right.
I don't study that, and I can't really answer those questions, but I can tell you one thing we did study in our study of pregnant women. We asked them about their sexual function. And we asked them how often they had sex and how satisfied they were with that experience. And
you asked women this?
The women
or
were
men?
pregnant.
Okay, got it.
Right? But it could well have been when they're not pregnant, because this isn't tied to pregnancy particularly. And the women who had higher levels of the same chemicals that are associated with the phthalate syndrome reported less sexual satisfaction and less frequent intercourse. So that means that's a lowering of testosterone.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
Need testosterone that's tied to libido and
right.
So that's an adult effect that we know about. We also know that phthalates are related to women's endometriosis risk, and there have been a number of studies on that, and that's an adult function. So you see, each of these studies, I have to say this again, is extremely costly and take a very long time. Right? You have to design.
Yeah. And who wants to fund this? Like, how do you get funding?
You have to,
because obviously,
you have to get,
the companies that have so much money, pharmaceutical companies, they're not going to, because there's phthalates in pharmaceutical drugs too, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. They're used as, for example, coating a nonstick, these dissolving coatings of drugs. A colleague in Harvard studied that quite a bit. Yes, they're used in pharmaceuticals as well. So to study all of these endpoints, each one of these is an effort of the kind that I've described. Unless you do it, there are cheaper ways to do it if you look at medical records. So if there are things that have a diagnosis that's recorded in a medical record or maybe an insurance database, if somebody came in for some procedure, you could look at the frequency of that procedure. The problem is, what's the exposure you're going to look at? And unless you actually have the urine at the right time, you can't do it. You see? So there's no indirect measure of phthalate exposure. It's not like asking somebody, did you smoke when you were pregnant? Well, that's easy.
Right.
You can relate that to their later term. Sperm count, by the way, goes down if you smoke during pregnancy. Definitely.
Right.
Yeah. And that's easy, because if you have a chance to ask the woman, maybe not so easy, because you have to get her during pregnancy and then you're back to the same kind of study I did. So the epidemiology is hard. It's slow. It's costly. And it's all we have, really. except for the animal studies, which are important, but rats are not humans.
Right. So it's a lot cheaper, I guess, to do animal studies.
It's a lot cheaper. It's a lot easier. It's a lot faster. You're talking about, the critical period for a rat exposed to phthalates is days 18 to 21 of gestation. For a human, it's probably weeks, somewhere between week 6 to 12 and probably more 8 to 10. So 8 to 10 weeks versus 18 days to 21 days. See the difference?
Yeah, right.
So it all happens very fast, and it's relatively cheap, and it's controllable. So you can actually control how much phthalates you give that pregnant rat. Can't do that with a woman. So it's much more difficult in humans and much more relevant to us as a species.
So what do you suggest? Do you have some solutions for people? I mean, it sounds like with this chemical, the best solution is avoidance. It's not like increasing your ability to detox phthalates. It's more about, no, actually, you just need to avoid them.
Right.
So do you have any, which
I don't know.
Is a lot.
I've never heard anybody suggest a detox for phthalates, by the way. I just, something you might think about, but I don't know of any. So the question is, how do you avoid them? So food is the primary source of exposure. And by the way, I just have to say that there are other chemicals in plastics we're concerned about.
Right.
Right?
BPA.
BPA makes plastic soft. Phthalates makes plastic hard. I'm sorry. Phthalates makes plastic soft. BPA makes plastic hard, like the water bottle. Okay. So, and then there are parabens. Parabens are synthetics, and I've called them the 3 Ps, these 3 chemicals in plastic that we want to avoid.
So parabens, phthalates, and BPA.
Phenols. Yes. Yeah.
Bisphenol A. And isn't like there was how many years ago was there like the big uproar and the awareness around BPA? And doesn't BPA just have cousins that could be equally as bad?
Yeah.
BPS. I don't know.
Yeah. Which manufacturers put it in so they could label their things BPA free. But they had these other things in there, which just
it's so manipulative.
So given that you're going to worry about your food and drink, the simplest thing to say and hardest thing to do maybe is to buy organic, fresh food, and don't buy it in cans, and don't buy it processed, and don't buy it in bottles. Try to ideally go to your local, if you have one, farmer's market, buy the food, take it home, put it in the fridge, not in plastic, and which is very difficult, by the way, and cook it as soon as you can and eat it. That's clean. Okay. But let me just say, not everybody has that option, right? You might not have a farmer's market. You might not even have a grocery that has fresh produce. You might only be able to get your food in cans and bottles. Cans, by the way, lined with BPA. So come as close to that as you can. Come as close to organic, unprocessed food, and you're going a long way. And storing it in some alternative to plastic. You can use glass, you can use metal, you can use ceramic, you can use cloth, you can use paper. There's lots of alternatives. When you cook it, I think you want to avoid coated pots and pans.
Like nonstick?
With nonstick. And that's a different class of chemicals. Those are the PFAS chemicals. Another P, but not they're not plasticizers, but they're similar. They give you a coating. So there could be a coating on your jacket so it repels water, a coating on your hand, a coating on your box of pizza you send for pizza, comes in a big box, that's coated with these chemicals. Right? So any of these coatings that protect and prevent transmission are important to avoid if you can. So I use a cast iron pan. I love cast iron. It's seasoned cast iron. I mean, why not? It's cheap, very cheap, much cheaper than the nonstick pans. So that's food.
And you said that's our biggest exposure. That's where most people are getting phthalates.
If you had to hit one thing, I would
Yeah.
go after your food and things related to that, like food containers. Another thing I would go after is smell. So fragrance, any fragrance product has a lot of phthalates and parabens in it. So, for example, those sheets, you put dryer sheets. No, don't do that. And try to get unscented products for cleaning in your house. And they're also in cleaning products aside from the smell. But don't plug things in your wall to put out a nice smell. Don't hang things in your car to put out a nice smell. These nice smells are not.
So what does the phthalate do? So in terms of it may have, if something has a fragrance, whether it's your toilet bowl cleaner or the hanging thing air freshener, it has phthalates. Is that because the phthalates are adhering the smell to the product? Is that how they work? Because they're like a plasticizer? Like why is fragrance always sort of synonymous?
I told you that one of the properties of phthalates and the reason they're used is because they help hold the scent and the color.
Oh,
so they're put into cosmetics. For example, your lipstick, you're not using any, that's great. But lipstick or nail polish, all of those colors and fragrance are held there with the help of phthalates. So, So try to buy unfragranced products. And we saw that in our study. Our pregnant women, we asked them in the last 24 hours, what did you use on your face? What did what products did you use? And then we showed that what they told us was related to how much we measured in their urine. We linked directly between their responses and to how much of these products are in the urine. So they're definitely getting in to your body, and they're definitely getting into the fetus. So, try to.
So if you're pregnant, no J-Lo perfume.
Right.
I am so anti-fragrance, though. I really, because of everything you're talking about, like we haven't had anything fragranced in our home in, I want to say like 15 years.
Yeah. And then I would worry about water. So we talked a little bit about water. How to treat your water is complicated. I'll just tell you my personal treatment is that we have a distiller we put on our counter, and every day we run a batch. It's free. You don't have to buy big containers of water, and you just process that every day, and then we put the water in the fridge and in a glass container, glass pitcher, and they're good to go. I don't know why more people don't do that. It's true. It takes everything out, including minerals and stuff. So you might want to add those back in, but never mind. So there's that. You can also filter your water. Bottled water is a mixed bag. It's not controlled at the same level as tap water. So water's complicated. Drinks, of course, contain a lot of water, and you don't know what kind of water, and like sodas and so on. So food and drink. Another thing is your air. So now we know, we've just been learning, by the way, that these microplastics, which are breakdown products of plastics, everything, are in our air and in our water.
Yeah.
So vacuuming with a HEPA filter is a good thing. Leaving your shoes at the door is a good thing. Try to avoid dust, but many studies have taken dust samples, collected dust, tested it, and shown it has a lot of these chemicals in it. So, and then finally, I would just say, if you have a product and you wonder, what is that? The labels are impossible, right? There is a resource that I use, which is called Environmental Working Group. And Environmental Working Group is a place that you can go to their consumer guides and put in your product, and it'll give you a ranking for many, many products. So whether it's skincare or it's cleaning product or it's sunscreen or whatever, you can look it up in EWG. And there are other websites that do this too. So you can hunt around and look for these. And our book, Countdown, contains a number of these resources. So you can look that up. Yeah.
Amazing. We'll make sure that we link that up in the show notes for sure, because everyone should pick up a copy of your book. And I so appreciate, I so appreciate everything you shared. It's, got me thinking a lot of, I like to think, being a holistic mama, and, I do my best to avoid as many of these chemicals as, of course, phthalates, but you just realize there's still more things that you can do. And I just feel like the more you know, the better informed choices. I don't know. I really feel that it's very inspiring and empowering. And I hope all of our listeners feel that way as well. And it sounds like there's so much we still don't know. But, I'm thankful for people like you who have a very curious mind and who are asking these questions. I really appreciate that. Is there anything else that we sort of didn't touch on that you want to share?
I would like to say to people, don't freak out.
Yeah.
Don't freak out. And please don't try to relate a problem in your child with something you did during pregnancy, because that's impossible, right? I mean, our studies tell us about averages. They don't tell us about individual problems. And so if unfortunately your child has a problem of some kind, don't try to beat your brains and beat yourself for an exposure you had during your pregnancy. It's almost surely not going to be the cause of the problem.
Yeah, that's really good advice, because I feel like as a mom, we definitely do that to ourselves.
Yeah.
For sure.
Right.
The mom guilt, right?
Right.
That's really good advice. So where can people find you and connect with you? I'll link up your book for sure. Is there anywhere else?
Well, there's a email, which is info@shannaswan.com. You can try.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Amazing.
Great.
Thank you so much.
It's been really fun. Thank you.
Yeah. I love chatting with you.
I enjoyed talking to you. Bye-bye.
What an awesome convo. I love the conversations we have here on the Joyous Health podcast. And, I feel so fortunate that I get to chat with amazing individuals who are experts in their field and super passionate about what they do. If you enjoy this as much as I did, please share this with others so that they may benefit from this info. Just take a screenshot and share it on Instagram, tag me and tag the guest we had, or send this link to your friend, your relative, or your neighbor. The more people who know about the Joyous Health podcast, the more people we can help live healthy, joyous lives. And of course, subscribe to the podcast as well. Thanks so much and have a joyous day.